Thank you, thank you. Yeah, thanks Livonia Public Library and the many throngs of people here. I appreciate it. I'm here today basically because of this book, which is available from me if you want. I think it's in the library here. I'm gonna be really mad at Ken if it's not yet, but yeah, you can get it from me if you like to. Amazon, anything like that as well. It is part of my, or it's the extension of my dissertation that I completed working at Wayne State University and then in Kingston at the University of West Indies, and then I turned it into a book, et cetera, et cetera. So part of this presentation is kind of like, this is the one that I'm going around, country, different libraries, different bookstores, et cetera, presenting based on the book in kind of a snapshot format of what that is, what dub music is, and what you can expect when you actually hear it and actually practice it. Generally, I'm in a smaller, kind of less, not auditorium kind of situation. I always let people try it themselves. So if you are comfortable on stage, you can come up at the end and try it, okay? That's the whole point of this presentation, is this kind of a hands-on thing as well. If not, I'll just do it for you and show you, but it's not, you're not gonna break anything or anything like that. It's not a big deal. And we'll talk about it and go from there, okay? So, the beginnings of dub music, right, start off in Jamaica after World War II, and actually World War I, because the issue, or we'll get into it, no, it was World War II, I'm sorry. Hedley Jones gets back from World War II and starts splitting and figures out, he was a radio operator, and he figures out how to split the frequencies of hearing and electricity into bass, mid-range, and high range, and then worked with Clement Cox and Dodd to build Studio One and to split these frequencies. And that's like the big starting point of dub and the process of dub. And we're gonna talk a little bit about the differences between what dub music is and what dubbing something is in the process. So according to Veit Earlman, it's now becoming increasingly clear not only that the boundaries between the spoken and written word were much more fluid than Marshall McLuhan, who is another philosopher, imagined, but also that they were blurred by a host of factors such as class position, ethnicity, and geographic location. So that's the point of the book, the kind of research focus of it. In the book, it's also separated into three kind of parts of dub music, talking about timbre, rhythmic interplay, and reproduction are some of the traits that allow the music to go throughout the world, but first to England and then also to America and Canada and everywhere else, Japan, et cetera. Hopeton Scientist Brown, in an interview I did with him, he is a very famous dub engineer. He's still around, he's still performing. He states that dub is without any end, it's infinite, it keeps going on and on. And one of the key things about this type of music and the process involved with it is that it can be done to anything, right? It can be done to any type of music. It's not just reggae music, right? It's not just Jamaican focused. What I'm focused on is, because I'm talking about the beginnings of it, but it has transferred into all forms of music. So one of the first two tracks that we're gonna hear briefly, right? E.T. Special on Java, 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 and Rest Yourself on Aquarius Dub are two kind of examples of this. Java, 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 Java is the first, there are two full-length records that came out in 1971 and 72, and they're the first ones and the first ways to be complete dub thoughts, basically, and produced. There were only 100 copies made. Luckily, I was given one by my lovely wife. I don't know where she found it, but it's still like ridiculously precious to me. And E.T. Special is for Errol Thompson, the E.T. Errol Thompson was one of the first engineers at the studio. And it has Augustus Pablo playing melodica on it. So let's take a listen to that real quick. And I'm just trying to give you some examples of this right off the bat. Hopefully, there we go. And generally in the sound system, the bass line is the key to this music, right? So the mix here, I guess you can tell there's some pretty good sound system in this auditorium. The bass is really high, right? It would not necessarily be that high if there was a vocalist or somebody trying to sing over it. And this is just one example of that. So here's the other one. Here's the other example, is Rest Yourself. You might recognize it. Anybody? Nobody recognizes this song? By somebody named Carly Simon originally? Anybody? Yes? A little bit? It's Too Late, Baby?
Carole King, actually.
Or Carole King, sorry. You're absolutely right. Thank you for the correction. Thank you. So this is an example of what dub was being done by producers, like in the reuse of popular tracks and the reuse of things. This is pretty much completely illegal. They didn't pay for the rights, they didn't do anything, they just recut it in the studio. And then messed with it, and it became kind of a hit, and it was tucked away. So what we're talking about and what the main point of today is that dub is a process that's done to music as opposed to just being a type of music. And this differentiates it from some sort of genre comparison to hip hop or dance hall or reggae or anything like that, or rock and roll, anything. Because each one of those things, like I stated before, could be dubbed, right? And the process is the key. It's an art of the studio engineer acting upon the music that's already recorded. And this is also something that's interesting. The example that I brought, and what I'll let you try if you like, is like a small mixing board, and it just manipulates tracks of existing music already, so you can have the opportunity to actually dub something today. Okay, you're going to process that. And the key to this music is that the original tracks are performed and recorded well, and this is really an important thing. If you don't have good musicians playing the original tracks, you can't do anything to those tracks, right? If you don't have a good drummer that is playing, in time all the time, right? Or if they're going up and down in pattern, it's not going to be easy to dub. So a lot of musicians, and this is all discussed in the book more in detail, a lot of musicians were the dub musicians, right? And they became known as this because they were the studio band and they would just play and perform those tracks. Okay, and there's a difference between dub as an act to make money and dub as an act of art. And those two examples that I just played are kind of those differences, right? So there was dub that was taking something like Carole King, thanks again, and kind of just using it to try to make money because it was a hit already, so let's make it a hit in Jamaica. And the type of dub that was done to be creative and to be artistic and to maybe make money, maybe not. So the main engineers and some of the equipment, King Tubby, Lee Scratch Perry passed away recently. Errol Thompson and Sylvan Morris were the actual ones that don't get discussed a lot. That's the ET special, but these were the first two people to actually dub stuff. And the big kind of key equipment pieces were the Fairlight mixer, an MCI console, and an Ampex reel-to-reel. Right? In Jamaica, there's this kind of thing that everybody I talk to, from professors to people on the street to people in the studio, the whole point is to make use of what you have around you, right? And to just make it work, like whatever it is, no matter how old, no matter how many times it's been handed down, make it work, right? And this is the kind of the key of what happened with dub. The story of King Tubby, I mean, he had his mom's house. His mom allowed him to turn their bathroom into an isolation booth, okay? And that's what became this huge famous, people came over all over Jamaica to King Tubby's mom's house to record in his bathroom, okay? And they overdubbed stuff and they, put on, different tracks and different flutes and different melodica sounds and all kinds of things. The Fairlight and the MCI are the consoles that we're talking about, right? So the recording consoles and the mixers that are being used throughout, right, the process of recording. And in general, the Ampex stuff went from 2 tracks to 4 tracks to 8 tracks to 16 to 32. Pretty much the 8-track is where dub is really the kind of foundational thing. Once it gets past 8 tracks, then it becomes, a lot more effective, actually, and a lot better dubbing. But when people consider this kind of classic dub stuff, they're talking about things from the 8-track time period. So because dub's a process, right, and hence the title of the book, Distillation of Sound, it can be distilled anywhere, right? It can go anywhere, and it can be done to any type of music. Through the dub plate being shared in the sound systems of Jamaica, and a dub plate is the first cut of an acetate. In order to make a vinyl record, you have to make a dub plate, really. And that is something that could probably get about 100 to 200 plays, and then it would disintegrate. Right? So what people found and what they started doing was those were the demo reels and the demo cuts, and they would give them to the sound system operators, the DJs, in these dance halls and parking lots in Jamaica, and they would play them and see what the crowd did. And if the crowd reacted, then they'd take them back to the producer and say, hey, this is a good song, make this song, right, and sell it. Because of that kind of stuff, it gets shared and it travels to England first, and then New York City and around the world from there. And in England, it's the first one to hit in England is King Tubby's meets Rockers Uptown. Yeah, that's grammatically incorrect, but that's the title. That's what it is. And it is talking about, right, this is the song. The record is the same name, but there was a single release featuring Augustus Pablo. And it's the key to this, how it gets transferred, because it was played on BBC. Actually, Johnny Rotten, do you know the Sex Pistols? I'm not sure if you know that. Johnny Rotten was being interviewed and was, upset about something and just being Johnny Rotten, and said to the interviewer, I'm not answering any questions, I'm just going to play records. And he took out a stack of records and he put that on, and it just became this huge hit in England. All the college kids, everybody wanted to listen to King Tubby's meets Rockers Uptown. Okay, and then it gets to New York, and Wacky's is a really key record store in New York, and Lloyd Barnes and DJ Kool Herc, and then it becomes and it turns into what we know as hip hop. Now, there's this huge kind of argument and discussion in the book, and throughout the community, that DJ Kool Herc is from Jamaica originally, and he was, right? He was born there. And people say that, Jamaican dub music and reggae music were all the precursors and what led to hip hop. He, in interviews, says that that's not true. He didn't have any influence. He was doing his own thing. He was creating his own thing, et cetera, because he was using disco and other funk records and stuff to do this. But the system, right, and the way that he manipulated the sound system and split the signals and used the bass and did all the things is right from Jamaican dance halls, right? So break beats and b-boys and b-girls, that's his term, become something that is very effective because people responded to the bass in the sound system that he was using. All of that's described in the book, a little more detailed too. Okay, so he takes this manipulation, right, and he creates this stuff, right? And people are, the classic hip hop story is that it was started at his sister's birthday party, right? And his sister was they were trying to raise money to get her a new dress to go to school, right? His kid's sister. And it was in this kind of apartment complex and just like in the center courtyard. And this is where hip hop starts, right? And that's a pretty classic story when it comes to that. Then Wacky's record store, owned by Lloyd Barnes, becomes this central hub in New York for West Indians and Jamaicans and others, and they get records. He keeps getting records from the Caribbean on multiple travels there, but also people would bring him records multiple times. And TC Valley is probably the first person in America to ever rap, quote unquote, on a record. Again, this was already being done in dub music and in Jamaica way before this. People were talking over songs way before hip hop started. And it's kind of an interesting thing to trace that as well, if you'd like. So here's an example of maybe a little bit of a different thing, but it is still similar to dub.
This is DJ Kool Herc, the father of hip hop. This is going out to my man over in Japan. You
can hear like the reverb and the delay on his voice and all that. All that stuff is similar.
This is how we do. For all the B-boys and B-girls, get ready. Right about now, we're going to rock it and jam with the jammers.
So some of the patterns in the, it's on a downbeat instead of an upbeat and all of these other kind of things that are different, but you can hear the kind of key elements in this between dub and something like that. He keeps going in and out. There are little fader moves with his voice that go, bring him lower and higher in the track. The bass kind of comes in and out at some points. There's lots of different kind of manipulations of the music within the track on that one particular hip hop track. You can see this in a lot of different things, Rapper's Delight and Sugar Hill Gang and all kinds of stuff from those original moments in hip hop that translate. All right, so back to kind of, the general reason that I guess I'm here, or what I've done with this stuff. I visited Kingston and University of West Indies. I went to Tony Myers' yard, which is basically his backyard, but it's a huge, the biggest similarity around here would be any of the kind of auto yards that you drive by, right, with a gated, dogs there are gated, and there's just tons of cars and parts and all this other kind of stuff, except instead of automobiles and parts for cars, it's all speaker parts, okay? And on one wall is full of, speakers that are being used to play records, right, and to listen to records on. So he was one of the first designers, right, to build these sound systems. I got to interview him, and it inspired me to build my own, and through a bunch of research and some conversations with him, I built a sound system. I just had this system out at the Detroit City Football Club game on Saturday in the parking lot, playing stuff. One of the big things that he taught me or told me was that it's not necessarily about the way it looks, it's about the way that you are constructing the sound, right? So a lot of people, when you have, particularly in the UK and Spain and other places, these sound systems are gigantic and they look beautiful and they're amazing. And sometimes the sound is good, sometimes it's not, right? And the big thing is this kind of focus on the speaker quality and the way that you wire it and the way that you put it into the speaker chain, et cetera, et cetera. So the principles there, I created that stuff and we moved on from there. After the build, there's another thing, and some of those presentations I will bring the whole sound system up, but I didn't think Livonia Public Library wanted a whole sound system in here. But I'm free to do that if anybody would like to, I'll bring it anywhere you want me to. But the big thing that I wanted to kind of push on still here for today is that there's this kind of step between what happens with the sound. Okay, so a preamp and an amplifier are the keys to the sound system that I have, and any kind of sound system really. The amplifiers are what power the speakers. Okay, and the preamp is what controls the frequencies. And this is the Ligua preamp that I have in the sound system is from England, and it allows for anything that goes through it to split it into those different frequencies, bass, mid-range, high, sub, all these things I can dial it in dependent on where I am in the world, right? If I'm in a parking lot or if I'm in a stage, if I'm in an auditorium, right? I can make little tweaks and changes to allow for the sound to be better, right? And getting that, it goes back to Headley Jones at the beginning of this conversation that, he was the one that split this into these 3 frequency ranges right from the beginning, okay? And then the amplifiers put the power to this thing. Okay, so what we have, right, is this kind of this chain of thought or chain of process, right? You have something that's playing the signal, right? A record player, a digital. Most of the time it's digital nowadays. But, I still like record players and I still play records through a sound system live. Then it goes into a mixing board, back to the preamp, to the amplifier, and out to the speakers. Now, some places, and now we have active speakers, right, and passive speakers, but active speakers have an amplifier built into the actual speaker, right? And an active speaker is going to allow you some benefits and some detriments. And I could talk about that for about 30 hours more if you'd like, but that is not for today's presentation, okay? But it's still effective. You can still do similar things with it, okay? So along with the mixing board, there's all these kind of different ways to manipulate the music itself. So, and you can dub, and people discuss this, and this is kind of the confusion some of the times that I'm interviewed and stuff about what dub music is, right? Because dub music can be something that's like a dance thing. It can be something that's putting someone in a trance or just meditative. It can be something that you're listening to musically. It can be any of those things. In general, it's a process that is done by the engineer adding all different effects on a mixing board. So what happens, right, in the studio, the main effects that they used in the past, and what I have today, but there's millions of other effects now out today, but the main ones were a delay, a spring reverb, an echo, and a high pass and low pass filter. Now a spring reverb literally is just a spring that the sound is going through. And when the sound goes through it with an amp tied to it, it makes this kind of boing warble, right? Now I'll show you later, a little bit later on, when we get into the actual process of this. I have a plug-in that does the same thing, but at home in the studio I have a literal spring hooked up to an amp where all of my stuff goes through. And you can flick it and it sounds like you're kicking a guitar amp, right? If you've ever done that before. Okay, and high pass and low pass filters are things that will allow, right, the highs to go through or the lows to go through. So they're on the most famous mixing board for dub is King Tubby's mixing board, and he had he made onto a mixing board. It's in the Seattle Pop Culture Museum right now. His mixing board is. He has what's known as the big knob, and he would just turn it, and it would just filter everything that went through it. Okay, and it literally was a high and a low pass filter. Okay, they all took the sound and affected it. And then fed it back into the recorder in real time. So what happens, right, in general, is there are two tape reel-to-reel machines, right? One that's playing the original track, it's going through a whole system, and then it's going back and being recorded to the original track. Nowadays, I can do this on an airplane, right? Right here with just this, I can do this. It's kind of amazing to me. I like the lo-fi stuff too in the original way, but it's pretty cool that I can do this on an airplane or in a car or something like that. Okay, in the sound system, once you get into like the live performative aspect of this, right, it's, they're used, there's delay that's being used, there's reverb, there's all these kind of things being used, but it's more about the DJ or the MC voicing over what has been created in dub. So there's two kind of separate things that are taking place often throughout here. Okay, so dub can be done live. I'm about to do it for you. But the key to dub is that it is the manipulation of existing tracks of music. So if you see somebody doing something live, someone that's really popular right now, and I think he's based out of California, his name's Pocky Man, and he's doing live dubbing. Victor Rice does this as well. He's in Brazil right now performing these things. But once the music gets to the sound system and the yard or the place of the dance, right, the music is then further manipulated by the frequencies, right, through the speakers. So the preamp that I was talking about can also manipulate this. You can manipulate those sounds. You can cut the bass completely out in the middle of a song, and you can bring it back in. You can cut the high ends out and bring it back in. So to think this through a little bit, think that the studio engineer dubs the track for the sound system, right? That's the intent, to give it to somebody that operates the sound system. Then the sound system operator plays the track and manipulates it further to make sure the audience is dancing or bobbing their head or doing whatever is required and what they want them to do. Okay? And without a good dub, the sound system can't make those changes very effectively. And without good musicians recording those tracks, you can't make a good dub. So all of this, no matter what you're like, I'm a musician first, right? And then kind of studio engineer second. If it's not good coming in, you can't manipulate it. You can, even today, you can cut things up, you cut and paste things and edit things all day long, make it sound exactly perfect. It's still missing something to my ears, right? So the same kind of thing goes with dub. Okay? So an example, right? So I'm going to play something that I created a while ago really quickly, basically for this presentation, but it's kind of taken on a life of its own. It's actually in Jamaica right now. Somebody's recording over it. It's kind of crazy, but whatever. So the track that's playing the horn rhythm, I just really quickly, I used some loops, I used some different things, put it together so that you could manipulate it. I'm just wanting you to hear the original, and then what is being done to it. And then we're kind of play a little bit more too. So again, this is just me in the studio going, oh, this is cool, I want this, I want this, I want that. Pushing buttons, kind of creating something. Here's a drum loop. I'm gonna just play over this drum loop, okay? The bass is, everything is done by me, created quickly. And it's just a track, okay? The horns are a sample from a sample bank that I paid for. I did not steal. And this continues and continues, right? So the next one is the same song, but then it's dubbed, I hope. So you can hopefully hear some of the differences, right? There's things being cut in and out. There's some reverb and delay being thrown on different things. Sometimes it's hard to hear in an auditorium. So a kind of final thing before we actually get into trying this, and I show you some of these things. Another really key, I guess, element that's being kind of fading away now as it goes. But for me, is that dub is like a right there at the moment process. I can never do that dub again, right? I could never do it. Like it's recorded, it's done. If I tried to listen and do exactly what I did at that moment, I'd never be able to create it again. It would be some sort of loss. I don't remember what I twisted, what I turned, what I did, what moves I did on the fader. And this is the same thing that the original dub engineers were doing, right? They're taking different things and they're manipulating tracks and sound at that moment, hitting record and then moving on, and that's it. And then it gets lost. So when you're listening to dub from the original people in the 70s, 80s, or 90s, wherever you are, even when it gets to digital, the people that are dubbing the digital tracks, they're hopefully, right, now you can manipulate the system that it can edit little chunks together, and there's all kinds of things on Logic and Ableton and all these different programs to do this. But the reality for me of dub, and I don't know if I want to say this on recording, but I mean, it's not dub if you're doing it, if you're editing it, right? It has to be in the moment, and it has to be this kind of creative process that's just done, and that's it. Right? I'm in the middle of doing a dub record right now that I send it to the musicians that send me all their tracks, and if they like it, they like it. If they don't, I have to start all over. It's not that I can fix one little thing, right? That's very different than a recording process. If somebody is recording with me, I can record them, and if they mess up a note, I can fix that. I can edit that, I can move the note, I can make it, lined up. Once all that's done, the dub itself is this intricate process that that's it. It's one chance, one shot. Okay? So before we get into it, and I keep showing you, any questions so far? I'm open to any questions or conversation that you may have on just the kind of basic process of it first, but then I'll show you some stuff and go from there. Yeah, I think. Yeah,
what app is that? Do you have the name of it?
What app am I doing right now?
I mean, yeah, that you did that on.
The program are you talking about? Yeah, the program, the one I use is Studio One, but you can use Pro Tools, you can use any of those things that I listed. Ableton, Logic, Fruity Loops is another one. There's a whole bunch of music programs out there. The most popular one and most used one is Pro Tools. The one that I use the most is Studio One.
Can you use GarageBand?
You can use GarageBand too. Yeah, yeah. And GarageBand's pretty easy to use. I don't know how you can, I am not familiar with the effects processing in GarageBand, the way that I'm going to show you in Studio One in a second. And Pro Tools is the same thing as Studio One, similar. So I'm not sure how you can add effects and that kind of stuff in GarageBand because I'm not that familiar with it. I know how to use it. I'm just not familiar with dubbing in GarageBand. Okay. Other comments, questions? Yeah.
The first two dub tracks that you mentioned, what was the timeline for those? When were those? When did they
Java was in 72, and that was the first full length they both came out at the same year. They're both in 72. Because Aquarius dub is a little, like there's an argument about which one is the first. I don't care about that argument. They're both around the same time. Also, the point in the book is if I had to narrow it down for a focus on research, and so my focus in the book is on full-length records, not singles. Okay, so there's lots of singles before the full-length records come out. There's lots of things there's a lot of dub plates that were done, a lot of singles. But the full kind of conception of, I guess instead of a drawing, it's a canvas, right? Like that's kind of where I was going for the research of the book.
What year was
Tubby is anywhere around that same time, right around that same time he comes in. 74, 76, something like that is when he starts actually publishing or getting his records out. Okay, so let's get an example going here. So we're going to change programs, so bear with me technologically. Hopefully everything just works. But, wow, okay, it actually worked. Okay, so this is an example, right, of what we just heard, the finished product, that horn rhythm, right? This is the track that it was done, right, up here. And then here, under here, right, are all the faders and like a mixing board. Okay? These are all the effects and ways to send those effects, right, to the track. And then these are the effects themselves, right? So you have volumes there and you have controls. Now, normally, so right now you have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You have 9 tracks right now. Normally, a 9-track board would be about this big, okay? I have this thing, okay? And it does the same thing. And it fits in my pocket, pretty much, or in my backpack. And when you do this, you can see what's happening with the faders, right? Can everybody see that? Okay. The one that you can't see, it's hard to see, is watch these blue lines, right? And the volume will go up and down when you twist knobs. Okay, did everybody kind of see that? Okay, so when I'm twisting these knobs, this is called a send, right? And it's sending this signal through this to the effects, okay? And it's increasing the amount of the volume and the signal going to the send, to the effect. Then, over here, in these green ones that are solo, say solo, right? Then I can control the volume of those things. And for some reason, that is not cooperating with me. Okay, good. Well, I'll force you that. Okay. And then there's a master over here. When you're actually doing a track of music and you're recording a track of music, this whole thing is filled up. I think the last song the song that I'm working right now has like something like 65 tracks, okay, of horns and bass and all kinds of stuff. But this is much easier to process, right? I hope. Than to see that. So the same thing, and this is what, you can feel free to come up and try this yourself if you want. It's just going to loop forever until I stop it. But it's the same song we listened to earlier. So if I start dubbing this, so now I pulled the horns out. If I want to make the bass louder through a compressor, I can do that. If you listen for this spring reverb, you can hear that. So that's a spring reverb on the snare drum. And you can play with this all. And you can do this forever and ever. This is what I do late at night. Okay? And try different things, and you just sit here and play with all of these different things. If you want it to go right or left, I don't know if this sound system is split. Is that on? That doesn't sound like it. No. It's not moving right or left, is it? No, it's all in the center. Okay, that's fine. But if it was set up, it would pan right and left channels of the speakers, right? And you can keep just, you want more delay? Then there's a lot of delay. Anybody want to try? It's not hard, and you can't mess it up. You can't do anything wrong. You can't break it. It's all just plastic. And if you do, it's replaceable, I promise. And it's all labeled, if you can read in the dark. So this is the effect, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Drums, bass. It's hard, yeah. I'm gonna start at the beginning of there, then you have the horns. And these are the effects. And the key is I can never do what he's doing, right? He can never do what I did. I can never do what he did. You want to come up and try it? Like it doesn't. If I hit record right now, it'll record on a loop. I'm not, because I don't want anybody to feel threatened or anything with recording. But like I'm not recording this, but so it's all live. It's right now, only right now. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I had a question.
My question was, I noticed in a lot of dub recordings that I listen to, the bass and drums seem to be more constant than, and the other instruments are kind of moved around the bass and drum. Is there a reason for that?
Well, okay, so in the book, yeah, there's definitely a reason. That's the foundation of everything, right, is the bass and the drums. The bass line, and that's also one of the key things and elements of dub music from the beginning, is that timbre, right, that we were talking about, T-I-M-B-R-E, and how the bass element and the focal point of the bass, right, is the key to everything. In Jamaican music particularly, the guitar and the piano are rhythmic instruments, right? They're not lead instruments. They may play a little bit sometimes, but they're keeping rhythm with the bass. The bass is the melodic instrument. The drums are holding down, you know, kind of the beat and the pattern. And then in most parts, right, you are right. If I, like, this is dub.
I have a question.
Sure.
Now, the reason for the dubbing, is that like for like live, when you're doing live kind of things?
There's different reasons. It could be a live thing, right? Like I could take this and do this live. In this area, I've done it a couple times. It's not like people, it doesn't seem to fly so well. But most of the time, dub was done in the studio to give to, right, like I was talking about with the sound system operators and the DJs and the MCs and that kind of thing. So you would have a track like this, right, and then somebody would chat over it or rap over it, right, and maybe talk, hey, this is blah, 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 and I'm, you know, as, you know, just this part right now, someone would talk over, you know, and all of this started to sell liquor in front of liquor stores. Like all of it started, that was the whole point. The louder the sound system, the more people that came over and the more beer and liquor you sold. Clement Cox and Dodd, all these people, they owned all the liquor stores, right? And they're trying to get, they're the bigger the sound system, the louder, the more popular, the more people are in front of your liquor store, the more people are buying liquor, and the more money everybody makes. So sometimes, right, it would be this, and there's be somebody advertising, or they're talking about a political situation, like a radio, right, station. And we talking, you know, like you have to, you know, big up Ting Soda, or, you know, drink Red Stripe, or whatever it is, right? And they're talking about some sort of political situation. This also gets discussed a lot in the book. There's a huge, the PNP and the JLP, there's, when this is being, they're fighting in Jamaica over the presidency. It's a crazy world, and it comes up into sound system culture also. I think that answered what you were saying. But this process here is more for the studio, right? And dub is, this is a studio. You can take, a lot of people do take this stuff out, and if you're performing live, there's a lot of live dub bands that are around in the country. Dub is a Weapon doesn't exist anymore, but they were a live band that the guitarist would have a thing like this set up, and everybody would come into the mixing board right here in front of him, and then the mixing board would go out to the house sound. So he would literally manipulate everybody. And I've done that a couple times also with live bands, and it's fun. But it is more, this is more, I don't know, you could perform this in a club, and people do. It's just not as, it's more, I think dub is more focused on in the studio for presentation and for people to listen to it at home or in the club. Other questions? I'm just going to let the bass run.
So if you don't have all the individual tracks,
Yep.
how do you take a song and pull all the individual?
Well, you make one, right, like I did. Or what you can do nowadays, and you know what has happened because of this whole kind of system, it's kind of come full circle. Now the DJ program Serato allows you to split any song you want into stems. And it will split it into bass, vocal, and different stems. Now, it doesn't do it perfectly yet. The AI doesn't, it's not good enough to dub, I don't think. Some people use it too right now, but you have to then take it into the studio, EQ it a lot, and manipulate it there. The way that you can do that, and the way that happens, is that sound system issue with the preamp, when you can split different signals. Now, originally on a record, and particularly in Jamaican records and record producing, the vocals were on one channel, like a left channel, and the sound was on the right channel. So you could pan, and just by doing this, you could remove the vocals. Okay? Now that with stereosonic, if you ever saw that on a record, it's just it's a marketing term that people started using, right? I think around the late 70s, early 80s. Stereophonic and stereosonic, right? It meant that everything now is kind of on one channel, and now it's being bled into the two, but everything can be heard if you pan it right or left, right? And it became clear. Now, there's also all kinds of cool stuff happening. I mean, the Dolby Atmos stuff, the ability to record in complete surround sound and complete manipulation of every angle of a room is amazing to me, and I'm really interested in that, and I have no idea what that could affect, how that could affect dub. Because if I could send that to like that corner, that would be really cool. Like I would love that. That would be, you know, like, and we can manipulate like where your ears are hearing things, right? That whole Sonos system that, you know, reads the room. It's just a speaker bar, right? And it reads the room and calibrates the room itself to the room. Like, that's amazing to me. That's like that technology. If you can take that into something like this in a program that manipulates that, and people are doing this. This is what's happening right now in LA in these huge, gigantic studios, and people that have, that's all they do with their, you know, that's their job and career, is to do that. But yeah, so that is something that, you know, the ability to split any song into stems, and when I'm talking about stems, if I close this mixer here, right, these are stems, okay? So these are split stems, like this is just horns, they've been mixed already, right? Like you can't separate the trumpet from the sax or anything like that in the horn stem. Okay, I can't split that anymore. Of that. The same thing goes with the piano. If there's an error in the piano, right? If it's off time or if there's something wrong with it, I can maybe move something in this program a little bit, but I can't fully get this completely separated. Right? And you can continue it, the same guitar. I might not like that higher end sound of that guitar right now. Again, this was done really quickly, but I can't really get into it right now. I could probably EQ it out, but you know, for purposes of this, it's not going to happen. Same thing with the bass. This probably needs to be a little bit louder, right? I can get it louder.
So before you had the stems, say like somebody like a Kanye, was he just pulling samples out of everything, just ripping a whole song apart, pulling samples?
Yep. This horn line is a sample from a song. Okay? That's just being reused and looped around. And again, you can do this live now. If I had my DJ table here, right? I could play a track, cut it up, put it into this, dub it. We could keep going around and around and around and around. I could do that with records or digitally. It's a little faster digitally, but it works still the same process with a record. So that is definitely what's happening. When you see like the MPC pads and all these controllers and everything where they're just hitting things, they're taking different samples from different things and controlling that. Whether it's a kick drum or a, you know, whatever it is, it could be anything. I have a sample of my kid when they were a baby screaming into a mic, maybe like 18 months old, going, ah! And I have it, and I just hit that sometimes. Delayed and washed it out and all this other kind of stuff, right? Because why not? I had it, and he was running around yelling. Here, have a mic. Do yell in the mic, right? But yeah, people like Kanye and you know, any of these producers right now, Future and all the people, Chemical Brothers. I'm trying to think of people that are not my age. I'm trying not to date myself here. Who's a new?
Fred again.
I'm sorry?
Fred again.
Okay, yeah, good. I'm not sure who that is, but yeah, I mean, all of these people are taking samples, right, and manipulating samples into tracks, into something that is quote unquote their own, right? Now the difference there, that's not dubbing something to me. Like I would make that argument that it's not dubbing. That's creating something that's like using different paintbrushes and different things in the palette. If you took those samples and then did this with them, that you can never repeat it, you could never like do it again, then you're dubbing it, right? That's kind of what I would argue or stand on to kind of defend this process. That this is the process, moving these faders, sorry, let me get that up for you guys. Right, moving these faders up and down and knowing how to do it in time and to hear it and to manipulate different things, right, and signals, and knowing that this delay is a little bit too slow and bouncing that up, or maybe you like it, maybe it's wrong on purpose, maybe it's right, you know, like the problematic issue of it makes it good, right, because you're never going to find that. People always say, I have a funny story to share, like people always are like, well, how do they get this sound of the snare drum in Jamaica in reggae music, right? And I'm in a studio in Jamaica where Toots and the Mytals records, and I'm with the engineer and I'm talking to them, and I'm saying, you know, everybody asks me about this, how do you get this snare sound to like be that snare sound? Right, and I don't know if I'm sharing secrets or whatever, but there's 6 of you here, and whoever's watching PBS or Access, go ahead, great. And all he said to me is that we leave the window open. And all the ocean and all the sand and all the crap gets on the snare drum. Right? And so, like, a dirty snare drum, that's the sound of reggae music. Right? Now, there's lots of other things. You have to tune it the right way. You have to do all these things too. But you can't get that sound in Detroit, right? Or in Michigan. You're not going to, maybe if you're by a lake, you get a different sounding snare, right? If you leave the window open. Or if you're in where fish flies are and they all fly onto it or something, right? But that's kind of the point of, and what drew me to dub music, what drew me to all of this stuff really, is that immediacy, right? And that presence of it. Right? That's why I like, even though this is pre-recorded, this is manipulating pre-recorded things, and you can't get it back. You can't get that moment back. Once it's done, right? With the people that are in studios cutting things up and everything and manipulating tracks through Logic or Ableton or any of these kind of things, yeah, great, that's awesome. It's just not dub. It's a different type of recording. It's using samples, it's manipulating, it's a different type of manipulation. Other questions? I don't know how much time we have. A couple minutes?
I have a question, Eric.
Yeah, sure.
Later on this evening, I'd like to open my laptop and see if I can find examples of artists that are doing dubs with decidedly non-reggae sounding tracks.
Okay, so, yeah.
With maybe classic R&B or even...
Well, okay, there's a couple ways to answer that. The biggest producer out there, from the beginning, his name's Adrian Sherwood. He's in England, and he has a record label called ONU, O-N-U, Sound. And he has dubbed and been doing dubbed versions of all kinds of music for decades now. He's responsible for dubbing a lot of punk music, a lot of different things like that. But ONU Sound, he has a really good, interesting project called African Head Charge, which is just bizarre and it's awesome. It's not for everybody. It is awesome music though, and some might not even call it music. But it's something like that. Now, R&B tracks and things like the Carole King kind of rip and all of that kind of thing. I don't have anybody to point you directly to right now that are doing that today. There are a lot of people that have done those dubs, but the majority of dub music that even gets produced, right, and put out on CD is Jamaican influenced music, reggae, ska, that kind of stuff. That's what's interesting about Adrian Sherwood and ONU Sound, because he didn't care, he just did it with anything and everything. Dennis Bavell also did a lot of stuff. He was really big in the lovers rock movement. I don't know if you watched that television show that was big on, I'm dropping the name right now. recently, but he was a producer and engineer. He's still around. We got lucky enough to interview him as well. But he was doing, you know, more of the kind of lilty, but again, it's still Jamaican influenced music. And he did a lot of pop stuff too. Things with the Slits and some of the punk stuff too.
And what was that name again?
Dennis Bovell, Bovell.
And who was the first one that you mentioned?
Adrian Sherwood. All of them are in my book. Yeah, I talked to all of them, and Adrian Sherwood is an amazing person. The way that he came up and the way that he was a runner at a studio, at a major label. He was just running like tapes back and forth in an office, and then he became what he is today.
I have a question.
Yeah.
When you see like on YouTube, you see like samples you can either buy or free samples. Is that like dubbing?
Like that would be what I was talking about when the other question earlier. Like you could dub them, right? Like so this is a sample. The horn is actually a sample that I purchased in a pack, right, for a long time ago. But I went back and got it. Then I wouldn't say that's dubbing just by putting it together, right? You have to put it together and then you have to manipulate it, right? That again, that's my opinion, right? This is kind of my, maybe it's an old mentality, but I'm sticking with it. Like I do think that the actual process of dubbing something is with a mixing board, digitally, analog, whatever way it is, with that actual moment of those 3 minutes or 2 minutes that song's going through, where the engineer is doing little fader moves or anything like that, that's dub. Just getting some samples and putting them together, that's a different creative process. It's not necessarily dub.
Okay.
Yeah.
But those samples are not dub themselves. They're things that you can use.
Yeah, you can dub them, right? Yeah, absolutely, yep. And you know, like you could talk about collage, like that's like if you're looking at this as an art movements, right, or art type terms, right? That's collage, right? And then what do you do with the collage? In order to dub the collage after it's done, you'd have to rip it apart again and put it back together to dub it, right? And then sometimes, right, if you don't have the artist's permission to do that, like your example of like how do you rip stems apart of a track, if you don't have the artist's permission, they're gonna sue you, right? Same kind of thing will happen and does happen nowadays. Yeah, so I think that's about it. We'll just leave it, you know, like that. Thank you very much. Thank you, Livonia Public Library.